focus precedes success. What does that mean? How does that work? First of all, let me define success in my terms. Success is simply an American concept. It isn't as much a scriptural one. That's why I think pastors really struggle often by giving a definition of success that Americans can understand and accept or appreciate or agree with. They say, well, success is doing things God's way. I said, really, then you mean Bill Gates isn't successful? Well, no, because he isn't doing it God's way. I say, well, to the average business person, that doesn't make sense, Pastor. And so I think to try to come up with a spiritualized answer to that question of what is success will get you in a lot of logic trouble. It sort of gets you in a do loop. But if you say, wait a minute, Scripture doesn't really try to define success. What is success? Success is this. And so there are a lot of things that it doesn't even pretend to address. Like Scripture doesn't address what kind of shirt you should wear today, or should you wear a watch or not, or what your company should do to buy an IBM or a compact laptop or something. And so in looking at it, I say, all right, if Scripture isn't real clear on what success is, and of course success in America may be a little bit different than success in a sort of a year two Mideastern country, so I just don't see Scripture trying to define it. So I basically said, all right, in America, we know what we're supposed to do and be scripturally, but success is sort of more of an American term than a scriptural one, in my mind. Success is the feeling you get when you accomplish your priorities. It isn't any more or any less than that. Success is not a 11th commandment or something. It isn't even a scriptural concept as far as I can see it. Now, there may be a remote verse that says the word success, but it doesn't really define it. So if we could agree that success is the feeling you get when you reach your priorities, all of a sudden a few things come into focus. There are some organizations that are successful but not significant. Significance is making a difference that lasts over time. And true significance is lasting over time into eternity. Everything else is only relatively significant and therefore ultimately insignificant. So there are some businesses that are very successful in reaching their priorities, achieving their priorities, but they aren't going to really make any difference. They build 17 more houses that will be rust and dust someday. But, pardon me?
According to your definition, Moses wasn't successful.
At what part of his life?
He died.
When he died, he did not succeed in reaching the promised land, correct? Therefore, he was not successful in reaching the promised land. But did he make a significant difference? Absolutely. Not everyone has to be successful. I think not all the people in the Scripture were successful. They weren't all successful. That's what I'm saying. To me, success is a far higher value in American terms than it is in biblical terms, or in biblical times. So if you could say basically that it's the feeling you get when you reach your priorities, it explains why a church of 25 that set a goal of having 20 can feel successful, and a church that set a goal of having 5,000 and only had 4,500 may not feel as successful as it did. I mean, it may not feel as successful as the first church did, even though it's much, much smaller. So by that definition, you could basically, whatever you set as a priority this year, you could succeed this year and feel like a success this year and not succeed next year, which is true. Success isn't a one-time deal. It's like you're successful and then you're successful forever. It's like you're successful it's the feeling you get when you reach your priorities. And so without focus, how are you going to even know what you set as priorities? Therefore, how are you going to know whether you're successful or not? One of the things that frustrates me is talking to pastors, and I ask them, Pastor, do you feel successful? Their most frequent response I get is, I don't know. Because they don't have a definition of success that is just a practical working definition of it. So when I say focus precedes success, what I really mean is, if success is the feeling you get when you reach your priorities, you have to have focus before you can even know what your priorities are. So there are a few points to do with that. Number one is, in terms of focus, one of the first things I try to establish is what I call single word focus. And that is, all right, our company, our church, our organization this year what is the single word that would focus the energies of our church this year, or of our organization this year? Robert Lewis and the pastor at Fellowship Bible Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, for 9 years had the single word focus for their church was equipping. He said, you know, every time at the State of the Church address, he would stand up and say, the single word focus that focuses our church is the word equipping. We are an equipping church. We are equipping the saints to do the work of the ministry. And one year I was there when he got up and said, the 10th year, he said, you know, for 9 years we've had this as a single word focus for our activity. And this year, our word has changed. And the new word is, we've been talking to the board, praying with the board and the staff, and this year it's going to be community. Because we are an equipped church, it's time to move into the community. Well, when he said that, everyone from the board to the beginning staff had sort of an intuitive understanding of what does it mean to be a church that's a church that's focus is equipping people to do the work of the ministry, versus one whose focus is to reach into the community. And so whenever I write a book, I always start out with a single word focus for the book, single word focus for each chapter, single word focus for each of the subpoints of the chapters, etc. Whenever I'm giving a talk, it always have a single word focus. My focus for my time with you all here is practical. It's like I'm trying to make it as practical as I possibly can for you to deal with practical issues in your life that you want some sort of fresh perspective on to help you deal with them between here and the time you get home, kind of thing. So that single word focus is, in my mind, real important. And the single word focus, what is the single word focus for your company? If you had to put into a single word what your total company is about, the thing that explains everything that goes on in the company, everything that the company is, does, has, will have, do, or be, what would the single word focus for the company be? And several years ago, I was in the process of trying to define this for master planning group. And I defined the single word focus as leadership. I had it that for quite a while. And then what I began to see was that leadership really shouldn't be the focus of the company. It's Christ himself should be the focus of the company. And leadership is sort of a second ring on the bullseye kind of thing. But the bullseye of the focus of the company should be a person, not a product or principle or process or system. It should be a person, and that's Christ. So just basically think through, what is the single word focus for my company? What do I want to do on this project? Or say on a given project, what is the single word focus for the project that you're planning to launch, or the new product line you're introducing, or those kind of things? Then the second thing is, in terms of focus, is what I call an audience of one. Os Guinness has, in terms of focus, what he calls an audience of one. He basically says that the best focus to keep in your life is to have God be your only audience. That you have an audience of one person. And for those of us who may be people pleasers, that's an interesting paradigm shift or an interesting focus readjustment in terms of who are we trying to please. I asked Bill Bright one day, I said, Bill, after you speak, what do you hope people will say to you? You know, good job, that was significant, that changed my life. What do you hope people will say to you? And he looked at me with sort of a puzzled look. And I said, I was just sort of waiting for him to say something. He said, explain what you mean by that. I said, well, after you speak, let's say you've spoken to 1,000 people, what do you hope when they leave the room and they're shaking your hand to say goodbye, what do you hope they say to you? He said, I never think about it. I said, what do you mean you don't think about it? He said, well, I just pray about it and I think, well, if God's pleased, it's like, I don't really care what they say. Isn't that an interesting way to look at it? And so a part of my focus precedes success is sort of, the first focus is who is the audience. The second focus is, you know, what single word is the focus. But then within those two focuses, then I go to a third level, which is our priorities. And with priorities, when you start working for a company, it seems like you have about 50 priorities. When you get to be the CEO, if you have more than about 2 or 3 priorities a year, you're in trouble. I mean, it's like if it's a pretty major company, having more than 2 or 3 main priorities for the year will cause you trouble. It's like you have to focus down to a few simple, really important priorities that you want to get done to have 50 or 500 or 1,500 people moving in that direction. You just can't get 50 priorities done at once. So what I try to do is I develop a grid, and I don't have a marker here, but if you can imagine in your mind a grid that says problems, goals, opportunities across the top. On your paper, they might want to draw it. Goals, or problems, goals, and opportunities. And then down the left side, it says the rows are 1, 2, and 3. The rows are 1, 2, and 3. The columns are problems, goals, opportunities. You got it? So there are 9 squares there. And you basically ask yourself, okay, in light of what God wants, which is the audience of 1, and in light of my single word focus for the company, or this year, the single word focus for this year, or the single word focus for this product line or whatever, what are the top 3 problems we have to solve? What are the top 3 goals we need to set? And what are the top 3 opportunities we should seize while we've got them? And what that does is that it brings enormous, what I call boulder level focus. Stephen Covey tells a story, and I've never seen him do this, but I've heard by the grapevine that he does it, where he gets a big glass jar, a big glass, like a big fruit jar or a big, sort of a big glass jar, and sets it on a table. And he puts, say, 3 big boulders in it like this, and he asks, is the jar full? Of course, the jar seems full. You couldn't get another boulder in there. He said, but the jar isn't full, and he put stones in there, little stones like this maybe. And he said, now is the jar full? Yeah, now it's really full. And then he puts gravel in there. Then he puts sand in there. Then he puts puts sand in there. He said, now is it full? And he said, now it's really full. So then he fills it full of water. He said, now it's really full. But what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, if you reverse the order, it won't all go in. If you start with water and then sand and then gravel and then stones, the boulders won't go in. They'll actually break the jar before they'll go in the jar. That's the story of your schedule. If you don't have focus of what you're trying to succeed in doing, basically you're going to get what I call lost in a sandstorm. You're going to get all kinds of just pieces flying around, or a dust storm. And your thinking is going to be real foggy. So one of the first things I encourage you to do in succeeding in getting what you want to get done for the year and having the feeling that we've succeeded as a team in accomplishing our priorities is to define what are the boulders we want to get done this year. And that's focus, but it's in the context of an audience of one and a single word focus. And in light of those two things, what are the priorities? And then just have at them. So that's what I meant by focus precedes success.
You say audience of one, are you talking about God being
Yes.
the one?
Mm-hmm. That's like I say, Bill Bright says basically, if God's happy, I don't care, and if God isn't happy, they can all say it's great, and I'm still frustrated. Yes?
Well, what you just outlined was a pretty good game plan for goal setters and problem solvers. Some of us are opportunists and really don't relate that well to what you just said.
Mm-hmm. And
How does that all tie in?
but do you remember I said that the third column is opportunities. There's in your grid there, you got top three problems, top three goals, and top three opportunities. And if you're an opportunity-oriented person, you really do desperately need the balance of the reality. Just because you don't like dealing with problems doesn't mean they're not there. You don't have to deal with them. So by having this, it gives you a much broader understanding of what your plan needs to be. You may say, I don't even know what the problems are. Then let's say this is the five fellows here at this table are your team. One may be a problem-oriented person and have them fill in the top three problems you got to solve. Two of them may be goal setters, have them fill in the top three goals because that may not be what you enjoy doing. But then you fill in the top three opportunities. So that as CEO, you've got a more balanced look at your company, maximizing the strengths of the people on the team and not just looking at what are the opportunities and let's go charging into them. Does that make sense?
Very much so.
Okay. By the way, you're all free to say aha if anything sort of really clicks with you here. It's interesting. You don't see what I see, but it's interesting. This is sort of the lunch line. It sort of follows this path right out here. It's like we get, and all the lunch line is sort of filling in this back. You had a question or stretching?
You had said that, it takes 4th year, or employee or whatever, to really become good, but you want the first week. In this day and age, it's hard to keep people around for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you kind of deal with all that? Because if it takes 4 years, a lot of employees you hire, you'll never get them to that.
That's right. That's right. For those of you who didn't hear it, and for the tape in case it needs it, the question is, if it takes 4 years to get to where you're maximizing a person, first year orientation, second year experimentation, third year evaluation, the fourth year acceleration, but you're not going to keep those people, what do you do with that? The reality is that most companies are very inefficient because they've got such new people there all the time. And so the question is, how do we keep the good people we've got? And I think the keys to keeping good people, among other things, are create an environment that maximizes strength and makes weakness irrelevant. Because people like working in their strengths and they hate working in their weakness areas because it's a setup for failure. I have a question I ask people when I'm interviewing staff quite often. I'll say to them, two questions I ask is I say, what percentage of your potential do you feel you're using here? The average person says, 20 to 40. Isn't that tragic? Literally, they say they're using 20 to 40% of their potential. I mean, that's not uncommon at all. When I ask executives the same question, I typically get 40 to 60, sometimes down to 20. But a part of the reason that they don't feel they're using their potential is because again, they're not their strength has never been clearly defined, and they're asked to work in planning paradigms that aren't comfortable to them. They're asked to set goals when they're really problem solvers. They would be happy solving problems. I talked to a guy one time on Josh McDowell's staff. I was consulting with him. I was explaining this, stop setting goals if you'd rather solve problems. He came up and afterwards he said, Bob, he said, he had tears in his eyes. And I said, what's happening? He said, well, he said, I just feel this is one of the freest days of my life. I said, well, tell me. And he said, well, my dad's a goal setter. And he keeps saying, you've got to set some goals. You've got to set some goals. He said, you know what? I hate setting goals. I hate it. He said, every time someone says, hey, it's time to set goals, he said, my stomach begins to churn. He said, I get literally sick to my stomach. I start getting short with my wife. But here's the key, he said. He said, I start coming in late and leaving early every day. But, he said, if they'd let me define what I do here as solve problems, just let me solve problems. He said, I love solving problems. He said, listen to this. He said, I'd come in early and you couldn't kick me out of here. But it's the same salary he gets. You see the implications of this for business in America? So if you have an environment that's focused on maximizing strength and making weakness irrelevant, understanding everyone is not like me, but trying to figure out on a few simple models how people differ and let them be who they are without trying to get them to be someone else. And focus on what Wiley was talking about in terms of encouragement. It really does help. The other thing is, I wrote a book called Why You Do What You Do, in which I explained that there are 8 reasons people do what they do. And in hundreds of interviews, I haven't seen a 9th reason, and I see a high percentage of all 8 of these. I tried to get it to go to 6, it wouldn't. I tried to get it to go to 8 and it wouldn't, or to 9 and it wouldn't. Let me give you the 8 reasons people do what they do. Not that you can understand why, let's say you've got a staff of 500. You can't understand why all of them do what they do, but you can understand what your executive team that report directly to you do, and they can in turn understand why the people do what they do. Because people typically do not work for money. You understand that. They work for money just because they have to pay the bills, but that's not why they work. That's why a lot of people take less money to go someplace else, and they turn over because it's a better environment for them. They'll actually take a reduction in salary to go to a certain place where they think it's going to be a more comfortable environment. Okay, the 8 reasons are these. To be loved, number 1. Number 2 is to be significant, make a significant difference. Number 3, to be admired. Number 4, recognized. Number 5, appreciated. Number 6, secure. Number 7, respected. And number 8, accepted. Loved, significant, admired, recognized, appreciated, secure, respected, accepted. Now, if you could find out from your executive team why each one of them is doing it, it may not be to secure it all. In other words, security to you may be a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. When I ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate all these things? To you, you may say security is number 1. It's like it's a 10. To them, it may be a 3. So you try to motivate them to stay. Look, this is a secure position. Yeah, but I want to make a difference. I don't care about security. So you have to understand, particularly the team that reports directly to you, why are they doing that to begin with? Why are they here? Why do they work? Because if you have a person and they work on a project really strong for a year or 2 or 3, or a month or 2 or 3, whatever, and they get to the end of it and you just give them money, but if they need appreciation, you don't appreciate what they did, or if they need respect and you sort of disrespect them but you still give them money, they're very recruitable. Turnover is very, very high. Just so when you're going after someone, when you really understand these 8 things, just ask them, which of these 8 are they interested in? How much of that are they getting at their work? That's why you can take people. It's like a recruiting magnet when you understand that if the person isn't getting respect where they are, and that's the number 1 need they have, and your company is a respectful environment, It's very attractive, even though the money may be the same or less. So I guess I basically say to reduce turnover, you create an environment that maximizes their strength and make their weakness irrelevant. Realize that everyone's not like you, and find out how do they differ and how do we meet their needs, not just sort of a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And then just encouragement, affirmation, encouragement, like Wally was saying this morning. Those three things would be, I'm sure there are other dimensions, but those three are really, really high on the list. And the other thing is, if you look at the really great companies, the truly great companies, a part of the reason they're truly great is they can keep their people. And if you look at the companies that you just really wonder how are they ever going to stay in business, their turnover is massive. About 1980, I began to see this concept of everyone is not like me, because up to 1980, I believed everybody was. I just assumed everybody's like me, wanted what I wanted, liked doing what I did. You know, it's like, it just was shocking to me when grown adults didn't look at it like I looked at it. And what I began to see was that I think about 80% of the people in society are still there. I literally do. But one of the things that I began to see was if you could help people see the various differences people had, once they saw it, lights came on, and they could understand how they could work together better. And the thing that really showed it to me was a conversation that I had with my assistant at the time. I was at World Vision designing and developing a little love loaf program, a little money container in the shape of a loaf of bread with an ichthus embossed on the top of it, which has now raised millions and millions of dollars, but I was just still designing and developing it at that time. And it was like every day I saw some new way to improve it, change it, make it better, higher potential, something. And my assistant came to me one day, she said, "Bob, when are you ever going to let this thing settle down?" She said, "When are you ever going to stop changing this?" I looked at her and I said, "Patty, probably the day I die or leave here is the day it'll stop changing, or if it stops changing, I'm out of here." I said, "Does this bother you?" She said, "It drives me crazy. It's changing all the time." And not in a way that, I just said, "Patty, look, chances are you'd be happier down in stewardship where nothing changes." It's like it's been the same way for 40 years. I mean, Lee Bernard, who was World Vision's early stewardship guy, they'd been down there for 15, 20 years, and they had all their procedures in place and everything. And I said, "Seriously, you may enjoy it more down there than you do it here, and I would understand if you applied for a transfer." Not asking you to, I'm just saying I would understand if you did. Shorten the story, she did, and she was a happy camper there for like 20 years. What I began to see was that as an idea goes through time, it goes through various phases. And there are probably 50 ways you could describe the phases. But the way I've shortened it down to, because I see the very specific, definitive borderlines on it, are a design phase where it's pure theory. It's like there's no prototype in place, there's no model in place, it's just pure theory. You've got this idea. The second phase is the design develop phase. It's actually a combination of design and develop. And it's where you develop the prototype. You take it from theory into making it happen the first time. Then it goes into the develop phase where the model is up and it's going, and you're beginning to take one McDonald's store and make it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 in the Midwest. Then the develop stable phase is the fourth phase, and that's where you get 15 restaurants going, but the French fries are cold and the milkshakes are warm, so you've got to have someone that's good at refining, improving, maximizing. That was Fred Turner in McDonald's history. And then the fifth phase is this, what I call a stable phase, where things are always just real stable. And people say, I'm sure, when I tell them these 5 phases, they say, "Well, Sherlock, what gave you the first clue? That's been known since the Stone Age." I say, yes, but what I began to see early was that every person in this room prefers one of these phases to the other 4. And they say, "Really? What? Which one am I?" It's like, where do I fit in here? And when you can define that, which our team profile helps you define that and helps your team define that, Then the real aha in it for me was that the team chemistry becomes predictable. If we had time, I could say to you, all right, tell me about your five, if this is your executive team here. Matter of fact, you got 5 people at home on your executive team. Don't even tell me their names. You don't have to tell me they're male or female. Don't have to tell me their age. You don't have to tell me their ethnic background. You don't have to tell me anything. Just give them each a number. But tell me where they fit in the phase, and then also at level. There are 2 things in the team profile. One is the phase, which of those 5 phases do they fit in? And the second is what level. Because I began to see that some people want to be the president of whatever they're in charge of. This is going to be an aha for many of you who are presidents trying to choose good vice presidents who have been presidents of other things that might not want to work for you. Some people in their heart of hearts want to be the president. They want to be the head coach, the senior pastor, the top dog where the buck stops. That's what I call presidential captain. Some people want to be a captain, but they don't want to be the president. They want to be what I call a middle captain, the associate pastor, the assistant coach, the vice president, the middle manager, the middle captain. Mature adult people who are not on their way up the ladder, that is where they want to be on the ladder. The third is some people don't want to be the captain of anything. They want to be on the team, make a strong contribution, have a respected input to the direction of the team, but not be the captain of anything. That's what I call a strong player. So there are 5 phases: design, design, develop, 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 stable, stable, and 3 levels. Okay? I wish I had a thing I could draw, because they're actually overlapping circles, 3 overlapping circles. You got the design phase, and then where the design and develop overlap, they're design develop, and where the develop stable overlap, you've got develop stable. Okay? And you got the 3 levels. If you would just tell me your executive team and put a number in each sort of where they go there, I can predict their chemistry for the next hour. I can tell you who would be try to boss who. I could try to tell you who do you think who should lead the team, who would follow the person naturally. I don't care if it's an age inversion. I don't care if it's a sex. It's like male or female. I can tell you how to put that team together in terms of team chemistry based on that profile. Now, so what happens is often that a person who is a designer developer gets an idea. They come up with an original idea. By the way, there are 2 forms of creativity. This is real important for you to understand. There are 2 kinds of creativity. When I ask people, I used to ask people, are you creative? They'd say, some people say, well, yes, I am. Some people say, well, no, I'm not really. That was the wrong question. The question is, how do you create? Because everyone in the room is very creative. The point, though, is that some people are originally creative and some are adaptively creative. The originally creative starts with a blank sheet of paper. They like to come up with a solution no one has ever seen as far as they know. And if you hand them 2 or 3 samples of how other people have done it successfully, they'll say, well, I'll look at those later, but I want to clear my own head first. They'll get their own thinking clear first, and then they'll look at those others to see if they missed anything important. This is the person that says, if it's been done once, why would we do it that way again? And so the adaptive creator, their sort of national theme is, why recreate the wheel? Why recreate the wheel says basically, I'm not original in my thinking, but if you give me a sample of how 2 or 3 other people have done it successfully, I can take those, mix and match them, and come up with something that's far better than anything I've seen. That's creative, it's just not original, it's not a blank sheet of paper. Well, the designer-developer and the designer-developer are original in their creativity. The developer, stabilizer, and stabilizer are adaptive. Okay, you got these 3 overlapping circles: a design, a develop, a stable. Where these overlap, you've got design, develop, and develop stable. Then you've got 3 levels that go through all of these. Some people are presidential captain designers, and some people are presidential captain stabilizers. some people are middle captains, and some people are strong players. And a part of what I'm saying to you is that if you divide these down like this, there are some very, very clear distinguishing dimensions to each of these phases, and everybody prefers one of these 5 to the other 4. And once you understand which phase you prefer and which phase your team prefers, it tells you a lot about how team chemistry will work. But it also shows you that, let's say you're a designer developer who has this original idea. Remember, these two are original creativity, and these 3 are adaptive. Let's say you come up with an original idea as a designer developer. You get the prototype up and going. And by the way, for those of you who are designer developers that enjoy developing prototypes, making it happen the first time, there's what I call the 7/8 wall. We were talking about burnout. They call it 7/8 wall. 7/8 of the way through the first prototype, your interest drops your natural motivation drops like a flat rock. Just boom. I've proven to the world it'll work. My theory will work. Here's the prototype. Look at it. Any fool could see it'll work. Now give me a new idea. Then give me another idea. But it's precisely 7/8 through the first prototype. It isn't clear through the first prototype. It isn't halfway through the first model. It's 7/8 of the way through the first prototype. Your interest drops like a rock. The problem is that your team is just beginning to even get it, maybe, or your spouse maybe just be starting to get it. So what it is, it's more like a series of gears where the design team should come up with, in a sense, a theory or design develop. Come up with a theory of it, develop the prototype, and then there needs to be a handoff to a developer who can basically take it around the country and hand it off to a developer stabilizer who refines it, maximizes it, debugs it, and then give it on to a stabilizer who will keep it going for the next 20 years. The problem with a lot of people who develop companies, the entrepreneur that starts a company, is that often there are designer developers or developers, they get an idea, they'll get it up and going, but once it gets down into here or down into here, their interest is so far gone that it's excruciating to go to work every day. It's like, this is so boring. We're just doing what we did last year. And so they sell it, but you know what? The high profitability is down in here. It isn't up in here. This is sort of break even if we make it or not. But down in here is where it gets really profitable. So a lot of people sell their company. 3 years later, their wife is kicking them, saying, "Why did you sell that company? Now it's worth $3 billion. You sold it for 23 cents." They have to be sort of. So the ideal, in a sense, is to build a team where those things are connected properly. Now, let me just go through a couple of these to give you a couple other thoughts so you can see which you are. Let me give you the honor word first. If you're going to honor one of your vice presidents who is retiring, and you know that they are in some particular phase, talk about how do you keep people, over time and create an environment where they don't turn over, et cetera. If a designer is retiring, you talk about how brilliant they were. This person was brilliant. They brought in the most brilliant patents we've ever had in our company, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's the most honoring word to use with them. With a designer developer, you use the word wise. This is one of the wisest people we have on the team. To the developer, most courageous. Now you may say, well, Bob, none of these are insult words. I'd like to be all these. Of course you would, but not at the same level. Some word in here is going to hit you like a 10, and the other ones may be 8s or 7s or 6s or 5s. When I get all 5 of them, ask yourself, which of these, if I could only have one, which one would I have? Developer stabilizer is faithful. Joe has been one of the most faithful people of all, or Sally has been one of the most loyal people of all. Let me give you their orientation. There's when you first come into an environment, your first day on the job, let me tell you how you sort of get oriented to what's going on here. The designer says, what is the theory, the theology, the philosophy? The designer developer asks, what's the process we're involved here? What are the 10 steps? How does this lead to this, lead to this? What's the process we're involved in here? The developer asks, what goal are we really trying to reach? What goal are we really trying to reach? Not what goals, but what goal are we really trying to reach? Once you say, all right, we're trying to sell 6,000 units a day in 2 years. Okay, got it. And then all of his energy unlocks, or her energy unlocks toward that goal. The developer stabilizer basically asks, what is the result you're trying to get? You may say, well, what's the difference between goal and result? Well, the difference is that a goal is just to sort of get to the top of the hill, whereas result is we've been at the top of the hill many times, but there's a more efficient way we can get there. And the stabilizer's orientation is actually control. Basically, how do we keep this under control? If something goes wrong, how do we get it under control? Now, another thing would be burnout. Not BO, that doesn't mean body odor, that's burnout. Okay. The designer burns out when the problem is solved theoretically. As soon as the theory is clear, the designer wants a new challenge, a new mental challenge. A designer could work on something for 10 years and never be bored, as long as the problem hadn't been solved yet. But the second the theoretical problem is solved, they want to move on to something else. They don't want to move to the prototyping phase of it, if they had their natural preference. Now, the designers are the ones who have the most problem in school, by the way, in the early years. If you're a designer, school and elementary was probably not a pretty sight for you. Because designers are seen as daydreamers, they're seen as lazy, they're seen as sort of ne'er-do-well kind of thing, but they're always thinking of this latest theory or something. Until they get together with Bill Gates and Bill sticks them in a room and they develop a whole new theory of computer chips or something. The designer-developer's burnout point is, like I told you up here, 7/8 of the way through the first prototype. The developer's burnout points, they have 2 burnout points. Number 1 is 2 years in 1 day. A developer, if you look at their resume, if you look at your own resume and you're a developer, you'll see that every 2 years, if you take the number of years you've been out of school, divide it by 2, that's the number of projects you've had. Either different companies or different projects. Is it that you're irresponsible? No. It's that God made you to be a developer. You work on a 2-year burn cycle. And the way it goes, for those of you who are married to developers, it goes like this. Day 1, if the goal's clear and there's a model in place, it's like just enormous energy, like excitement, energy. 6 months, same thing, energy. 12 months, man, this is exciting. 18 months, this is exciting. When are we going to need a new project? Oh, never, man, I love this thing. 2 years in 1 day. I think maybe God's calling me somewhere else. I'm sort of losing interest in this. This is sort of, I just sort of feel burnout, honey. I need a new challenge. This is just sort of getting boring. 2 years in 1 day, mark the time. You may say, well, Bob, I've been at the job I'm at 3 years. I say, what's the last year been like? You say, not pretty. I've asked that 100 times. The answer is always the same, not pretty. So it's 2 years in 1 day, or until there's a sense of failure. Because developers, for some reason, have an enormous fear of failure, typically. There's the third one, and that is when the goal has been reached. In other words, if the goal is reached, this person wants to go on to something else because they're so goal-oriented. It's like, if you plan to take 2 years and you got it in 6 months, what am I still doing here? There's a sort of disorientation if there's not a clear goal in sight. The developer stabilizer is about 4 to 5 years. In other words, they want to stay at something 4 or 5 years and get pretty good at it and get it ramped up and then begin to, they want to move back into a little more challenge, but not clear back in here. They want to move sort of back a little ways into something with a little more tweaking necessary. And the stabilizer is 20 plus years or until there's disloyalty. Loyalty is such a high value for a stabilizer that if there's not loyalty, they want out of the environment, or they want to control the person that's disloyal, get them out of the system, or they want to leave. But if there's loyalty, they'll do basically the same thing for 20 years. And some of you in the room may say, "Are you kidding me? Why would anyone do something for 20 years?" I say, everyone's not like you.